What's up, guys? My name's Isaiah, and I am this year's UTA AIAS president. Going into the fall 2020 semester, we knew that we were going to need to rethink the way that we do all of our programming to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. Our team decided to pivot our efforts by transitioning all of our events from in person to a virtual platform. One of our most successful events of the semester was our panel discussion series. For this particular panel discussion, we actually collaborated with another student organization, NOMAS, which stands for the National Organization for Minority Architecture Students. With the topic of social injustice and equity on the forefront of everyone's mind this year, we felt that it was an important conversation to bring forth and be a part of our panel discussion series. Not only do we have NOMAS to thank for this collaboration, but also our college, which is the College of Architecture, Planning, and Public Affairs here at UT Arlington. That now brings us to the topic of today's discussion, which is critical social issues and the role of designers. We hope you enjoy the conversation.
21 years of experience across a broad range of public and private architecture projects. He works closely with project teams to plan and organize project designs to meet his client's budget, schedule, and design intent. Maurice has experience in planning, design, construction documentation, and construction administration on a variety of project types. He is passionate about projects that transform local communities and stimulate intrinsic value in the surrounding neighborhood. He is actively involved in the local Dallas-Fort Worth NOMAS chapter and serves as a NACE mentor and volunteer in the Dallas area. He is currently a project manager at Stantec. Our next panelist is Gianna. Gianna Pigford is an active member of the Dallas community and is committed to professional and community involvement nationally. She is involved with AIA Dallas, NOMA Dallas-Fort Worth, the Urban Land Institute, Texas Society of Architects, the National Council of Architectural Registrational Boards, and she was the Experience Committee Chair. She was named one of the Dallas Business Journal's 40 Under 40 in 2015, and she has a Bachelor's of Architecture from Mississippi State University. She is a registered architect in multiple states, a LEED accredited professional, and an NCARB certified architect. She is currently a project manager at Stantec. Thanks to our three panelists for being on our panel.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia, and thank you again to all of our panelists for joining us. I'm very excited to hear about all of your perspectives and your experiences and how they relate to the issues that we're going to talk about today. So the way that tonight's going to work is we're going to have, I like to think that it's more of a casual conversation amongst our guests that we have here. And if anyone here in the audience has any questions that they would like to ask, we're going to have a Q&A session at the end of the conversation. So feel free to add those to the chat at any time, and then we'll get those answered once we've finished the conversation. But to start off, Patricia and I are going to go back and forth and kind of contribute to the conversation here, but I'll start us out. I wanted to pose an initial question to the group, and we'll kind of go around and get the perspectives of our guests here. So the first question is, how does the built environment contribute to or alleviate the impacts of social injustices? And if I may, can I start with Siboney? Do you mind answering that question? How does the built environment contribute to or alleviate the impacts of social injustices?
How much is this? This is the only question, right? This is it.
We do have a couple of questions.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I had to introduce with levity. I think we should always be asking this question, right? So I was happy to see this one. I think just in itself, a part of alleviating impacts of social injustices is continuing to ask this question. I think we as architects and designers tend to uphold systems rather than, and just respond to them rather than actually challenging them. And I'm speaking very broadly, but that's related to codified laws that affect how land is created. I think also we need to be really clear about not being apolitical in our work. Policies affect our work, and so we need to continuously, we can't address the injustices without first stating that our work is very political because it is regulated through policy. I think also we have not just a tendency, but but it's through the history of Eurocentric narratives, not only through architectural education, but also through, say, I remember working in San Antonio, and there was the Conservation Society, and what color palettes were deemed appropriate for specific neighborhoods as it related to German aesthetics, right? So what are those pieces? How are we making sure we're making statements about carceral states? I think we need to move past JEDI, justice, equity, diversity, inclusion statements, or red-eye statements. There needs to be kind of action. So how to contribute or alleviate, I think it's having these discussions, but then following them up with actual commitment, and challenging those systems that we have responded to. There's a whole list, and for those of you who don't know about Design as Protest, I'm a part of this effort. It's called the DAP Collective. I'll put the link in the chat after I stop talking. And there's a whole list there as it relates to SEPTED, education, carceral state, housing, affordable housing. How do we really define affordable housing? So it's also challenging definitions that we operate in. I think Alleviate is having these conversations, and I'll stop there because I want to hear from Maurice and Gianna.
Well, you've said quite a bit, so
I was gonna say, yeah. Go ahead, Gianna.
Yeah, I don't want to dive into specifics, but yes, I know Brian Lee's work and others who have joined him in the cause for DAP. That is incredible stuff that he's doing. And if you guys have any opportunity to hear him speak, and he's been doing quite a bit of it here lately, please do listen to what he has to say, because he says it much better than I would ever say it. But some of the things that that the built environment can address, just as Siboney said, is the things that has to do with development, period. How you use land, how you consider taking on projects, things like, and I'll be specific, like the border wall and everything surrounding that, gentrification, how policies have allowed for years the redlining to continue, even though people say it's not continuing, but there's still policies that are in place that were made years ago that we need to evaluate why we're still allowing it to happen, and to regulate how we build and develop and how we service those underserved communities. I think those things definitely have to be addressed, and as professionals in the design industry, it is our part to stand up for what is right and just for those people who are marginalized.
Well, yeah, I mean, just piggybacking on what Gianna and Siboney said, when I was thinking about this question, our built environment, it consists of, the spaces we live in, how we build our lives, how we live our truth, and tell our history. And when you think about the built environment that we live in now, and how can we, how does it contribute to who we are? I mean, America is, we are a system of, we are groups of people, and we've been called to come together and live individualistic. But when you bring those groups of people into, into a country like America, that is made up of so many different cultures, so many different histories, you will have various styles and various design aesthetic that will begin to define a particular community. So our built environment, to me, it wholeheartedly contributes to just who we are, and just how we establish our cultures. When it comes to us as architects and designers, how we contribute to that, to me, and I know we'll get to this later in the conversation, but to me, it's listening to those communities. It's really understanding, what makes that community tick and what ticks them off. I'll just be just as blunt. And that takes time. That takes a lot of investment. That takes a lot of meetings. That's going to take a lot of just back and forth, design ideas. But design is a collaborative effort, and how we contribute to our built environment, it's collaboratively. When I think of, when the second half of the question is, how can our built environment alleviate social injustice? I think of let's say the African American History Museum in DC. I think that's one building that begins to celebrate a history, even beyond what we've been through and what we've come through, not only as a people, but just as a country. And to me, that helps celebrate that and really just tell the history. We have to know our history. We can't come into um, any kind of design solution thinking that we have all the answers. We have to listen to the people. We have to listen to our community, our constituents, and we have to really understand what it is that we're diving into, um, but to help respond to that, um, you know, you know, in our built environment.
Oh, those are all great answers. And I think what's interesting is that at least one of the things that I've learned in architecture school and specifically architectural history classes is that there has been the argument, or the argument has been made for quite some time that architecture can't, promote or do anything to solve social issues or contribute to them. But I think each of you have kind of expressed the opposite to that, that the architecture and the built environment has a capacity to do both. And as I think Siboney probably spoke to this a little bit in her response, is that for the longest time it has, made contributions to social injustices. And Gianna, you also mentioned this too, that they're just inherent in the systems that are in place. But I think all of you also recognize that there's some great capacity for the built environment to alleviate these issues also. And I think all of those were rooted in taking action. I think action was something that each of you described as being integral, moving forward, that it can't just be, plans or conversations, but the action is equally important that happens after. So thank you for that. Patricia, did you have the next question?
Yes, I do. So in your opinion, what are the biggest issues of equity that the profession of architecture is facing today? And whoever would like to start can jump in.
Can I take that?
Yes.
Go for it.
For me, it's making sure that we have creating more diverse teams to help our clients and our communities, help them to see not only the problems, but just the opportunities, and develop and creating a more design in a more holistic manner. Our teams have to be more creative, more diverse when it comes to some of the these what I call community-based type projects, churches, schools, are, just our institutions. They serve our communities, and it takes a team it takes a diverse team to really respond to that, and not just diversity in terms of skin tone, but even just diversity in uh, your sexual orientation, your diversity in your political, religious views. It takes a group of people to really sit down and come together to address some of those social injustice and design issues that we're discussing tonight.
I think the industry right now, because I'm a part of a number of organizations, and they all seem to be at the same place. And I think Siboney mentioned it briefly. They're trying to struggle to get beyond their statement that they made a couple of months ago. They're trying to figure out what is the next thing. Like, how do they actually do what they said that who they are? They're really trying to figure it out. And I think it's a struggle for a majority of people, because they've never had to look outside of themselves and think differently about what someone else may consider their organization, their firm, or that they actually have people within their firm who are having a very difficult time based on their policies or the way that they carry on or care about their employees. So I think what is a struggle is they're just trying to figure out how to eradicate those systemic issues that are inherent to our industry, as well as how it affects their organization, their firm, their community, and then some are looking into personally and trying to figure out how they can become more of an ally. But then there are those other people who don't see that there is a problem. And I hear those too. I got to have a difficult conversation later part of this week with someone, an organization that doesn't want the organization to address diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I have to somehow get them on board. But anyways, I think it's going to be difficult for them to understand that this isn't a marketing exercise. This isn't something that they're going to come up with some great program in the next 6 months and roll it out with some great letterhead and an awesome logo, and it's going to fix everything. I think they have to figure out, and the industry at large has to figure out that this is long term. This isn't going to they're not going to solve racism and social injustice in the next 12 months. That there are going to be some necessary partnerships with some of us that are in the room tonight in our organizations. They're going to have to really break down some of the barriers that are pretty much siloing people or dividing us. And if you want to go back to the first question and talk about design as protest, right now we're divided about how do we even protest? Some people don't even agree that we have the right to protest. Just some very basic understanding of where we are and where we need to go needs to happen. And I think it's going to take a long time for some people to understand that it's necessary.
So yes to all of that. I think going back to Maurice's comment about community, one of the bigger issues for equity in my mind is kind of this really important transition that's fundamental to how design kind of evolves, and that's related to collective effort versus individualistic successes, not just within the community, but within firm-wide practices. And so as you diversify teams, there are going to be huge advantages from different perspectives that are going to yield different approaches. And unless we actually embrace those, we're not doing the diversity of the teams justice. And so I think too about the promotional structures that are affected by those diversity spaces, because you can invite people in, right, make a diverse team, but what is the retention rate as it relates to actually implementing those thoughts? Having been in a position where I was prioritizing community through Latinos in architecture efforts, and I hit a lot of what's the word I'm trying to be? I hit some challenging moments. Bureaucracy, where it was an ask to be more safe in the committee work. And as a Latina in architecture, I have a commitment to community, and that's what I want to bring, and for it to not necessarily be a part of the promotional structure that is valued at a firm is another challenge. So we need to think through how success is defined and what those different kind of, I feel like firms have all of these kind of structured pay spaces, and if they're not including and wrapping in collective efforts, then we're just going back into this like individualistic successes, like architect's name on a building, not a team effort. And so making sure that is a part of it. And that goes back to the accessibility. I mean, even throughout the like education of architecture and licensure, there's all these paywalls. And you leave, I mean, I won't go into too much, but you leave because you're not going to be able to pay back. And that deals with the promotional structure, right? So all of these are connected. I know that I couldn't afford an architect's services either. So it's like, who's being exposed to our services as well? Who can afford our services? And I think it sounds like a lot of different things, but those are all related. And so I guess it's accessibility would be one of my bigger kind of overarching pieces.
Absolutely.
Isaiah, would you like to ask the next question?
Yeah, sure. So there might be some things that we could take from this last question, but maybe you could expand on them. The next question is, how does your work, your designs, or your practice respond to these issues? And I'll throw one more option in there. All of you are involved in various organizations, so you could also plug in how is your work within those organizations responded to some of these issues. Anyone's open.
So,
Absolutely. Go ahead,
so
Gianna.
Maurice and I just recently
Mhm.
started working at the same firm. He joined us about a month ago.
Mhm.
So Stantec has an in-house diversity and inclusion program. They've had it for some time, well before May 30th, 2020. But we didn't want to rest on the success of that program and what we've done to move forward the needle as it relates to diversity and inclusion, and whatever the trendy word is of the moment. So we've put together a panel of, I think it's about 25 people across the firm, and Stantec's very, very large, to evaluate what have we done that that has gone well, what can we improve, and what are new avenues for us to really do as we say we are, and really champion um, uh, uh, society at large, as well as all of these other things that affect our employees, the industry, and our community, because Stantec is kind of community focused in everything that we do. And so they've been working towards what other internal programs that we can do, what can we do to highlight organizations and partner with them. They are working with NOMA, which Maurice and I are a part of, and other organizations. I just brought another one to them to think through how we can help women have more success in the industry. And so my personal practice, what I do is I found myself evaluating whether or not I was thriving and being accepted into the industry at a very prominent and well-respected firm. And I was questioning what were my next steps. Should I leave the industry? And I started, putting the oxygen mask on myself and evaluating myself and my opportunities. And in doing so, I started building this framework for how I could move myself forward in the profession. And in doing that, I started mentoring and other things, join organizations that I felt could help in those arenas. And so I sometimes feel like I've spread myself too thin, but I feel like it's so important to, as a Black woman who is a registered architect, to really be vocal, be present, be visible. And I am, I ran across this quote. I'm gonna mess it up, but I ran across this quote just last night, and I was just reading some poems because I like to pretend like I'm a poet, but I'm not. So I ran across this Maya Angelou poem called "Our Grandmothers," and it starts talking through like just the history of women and Black women and all of these things. And one of the lines in there, I'm going to mess it up, but it's like I may be one, I may seem as one, but really I'm 10,000. And so I want to view my presence in this industry. I'm one, but we just got to 500 Black women architects. So I'm one, but I want to project and make it possible for us to get to the next 500, to the next 10,000. I want us to move that needle forward, but not just for Black women in architecture, but all minorities in architecture, and those, not just minorities, but those that are struggling to really make this practice something that is worthwhile and meaningful to them. And so I am active in AIA. I've just this year joined their strategic council at the national level. I've joined ULI at the national level on the women's leadership and the diversity, equity, inclusion front. And it's just because I want to move or elevate my opportunity to bring about change, because I think that's the only way. If someone's like knocking over these barriers, it's the only way we can transform the landscape for us. And so I'm doing as much as I can, sometimes more than I need to do for this. But I think as the more I push, I create a path for someone behind me to do more than what I can do. And so I'm doing my bit, the little piece of the pie that I have to deal with, and I'm hoping that someone else comes behind me and just really set it on fire. So that's my intent.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, how do we go from there? It's interesting because you were talking about paths, and as you create them, Gianna, right? It was Toni Morrison who talked about if you have the power, and I wrote it down somewhere. When you have these jobs that you have been so brilliantly trained for, just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free somebody else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else. This is not just a grab bag candy game. And I think that's the advocacy, right? Is how are we advocating for architects in community spaces, and how are we advocating for community and architecture spaces? And I think it's also in my own personal practice, it's challenging when someone says you're an activist and an architect. I say, why is that two separate things, right? It's like sustainable architecture. It's like all architecture should be sustainable. And so I think, I mentioned accessibility as being a challenge, and I think that's the barrier piece, right? It's how, if I've made any headway, what are the ways that I'm looking back and making time, whether it's on a committee, right? Whether it's helping, with Latinos in architecture. And now that I've moved to Boston, I'm part of BOSNOMA and in the mentorship program there. But if it's not in a formalized way, I actually have gotten contacts through individual young Latinas who are studying architecture, who get connected to me through some sort of way. And it's sometimes just making a call with them on Saturday to talk through what NCARB is. So they don't have to go to the website, right? Like, and they will have to, but like, what is it in kind of anecdotal qualitative space from a Latina to talk through what my challenges were, kind of in a much more casual setting versus reading a chart or a PDF that can be in itself daunting. You don't need the language describing the daunting trajectory to, right? Like it's like, what is that accessibility? So I've just really prioritized making myself accessible and being the mentor that I wish that I had had, and then also learning from younger people. It's not just about what I can teach them, right? It's also absorbing and listening to them. And I prioritize intergenerational exchanges. That was a big part of Latinos in architecture, was also how are we listening to elders as ways to communicate what needs to happen in our various spaces. I think also within committee work, prioritizing community-based public space projects, and that's been a part of my effort. Now I'm, because I'm working in affordable housing development, there's a lottery system in Massachusetts, so I don't know my clients yet, because as we're developing, we don't know who the residents are going to be. And so I have argued for, since being in the Rose Fellowship, we have a resident services team in-house. And so how are we speaking to, what is the, we talk about building commissioning, but what is the human commissioning as we're talking to architects designing our future affordable housing? How are we speaking to our current residents about what is ideal, and what is that information that needs to be a part of this development? So that's kind of how I tend to do the translating. I think I also focus on language, and I saw Dennis in here. Dennis knows that I tend to challenge really problematic terms that are kind of rooted in racism and sexism and violence. And so I think through how we can decolonize our language as it relates to transactional terms. And so that's a part of the path to equity. That, I mean, there are lots of paths, and there are levers, and you're kind of dialing depending on your capacity.
Wow. Once you have that put together as a book, Siboney, I expect to see that as a #1 bestseller on how we can break that language down. Wow. So for myself, just how do I respond to those issues in my daily practice? It just really just made me think through, just how I was brought up in this profession. Coming out of college, I worked for a small, 3-man shop, and was a Black architect, and we did a lot of work in the inner city. And the majority of the work that we did was a lot of housing, a lot of additions, residential, church additions, residential additions. We would partner with other majority firms for those joint venture projects. And but going through coming up in this profession, I really became, just had an affinity, I guess, towards doing that type of work. So like I mentioned earlier, and even as Siboney mentioned, I love doing those community-based type projects. It's a passion of mine. I get excited about them. Whenever they come across my desk, it's like whatever else I was doing here, I kind of make that more of a priority. Um, there was one particular project that I was involved in a master plan project in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in Vision Comanche, which we looked at an existing 200 unit site in North Tulsa. It was just north of where Black Wall Street was in that area. And the history of that area was just very rich. I mean, we just did that I was working on that project a couple years ago, and there was information that I was getting out of that community that I didn't even know existed, just in terms of our history as African Americans. And it was just a very interesting project, very involved. We did a lot of work. We had a lot of community meetings. We did a lot of kind of just sketch workshops. Um, we did presentations for, not presentations, what they call those community events with the bounce house and, the Lego sets and things like that. And the kids would come around, and to get architecture down to that granular of a level of just understanding what design is, how the position of a particular building can really impact your space, how a view from your bedroom can look down into this courtyard. I mean, that type of uh, um, communication that we had with the community at that level. I mean, I was talking with 12-year-olds and 10-year-olds that were just excited, and it got me excited. But it also brought out our best selves, when we would take that energy back to the team, when we'd have our kind of debrief meetings, the energy and, when we would be in the room or on the call, it was always high. And it really pushed us to um, really deliver a strong project, one that community could be proud of. Granted, it was a master plan project, but man, I just have fun. I just have fun. But I love doing those type of projects, and and even now coming into as Gianna mentioned earlier, coming into Stantec, uh, you know, the our motto is design with community in mind. So that's what we do, and that's what attracted me to even be a part of it. I wholeheartedly believe that it is the community's project. We take the skills, the uh, expertise, the experience that we gain as we go and grow in this profession. But to me, this is a service profession. When you look at doctors, lawyers, architects are right there. I mean, we're service providers. One of my mentors used to always tell me when I would work on, multifamily housing projects or senior living unit, if I'm trying to figure out how to get the the maximum capacity out of just the tightest square footage, he would always say, design this with the same level of care as if you were designing it for yourself or your family members. And you put on a different hat when you're designing at that level, and thinking through some of those design problems. So yeah, I mean, how do I respond to the social injustice issues from a design standpoint in my work and in my practice? I design as if I'm designing it for my family, and I want my family to have the best. Just I'm sure as anyone else would want their family to have the best. And just like with any project, we have budgets, we have schedules. There's always constraints, but with our design thinking and with our um, understanding of problem solving, we can work through those to where we can still come out with a pretty holistic solution. There's always going to be critics. There's always going to be someone that say that, you know, my bedroom's too small, or you know, this room isn't big enough for my I don't know, soccer team or whatever. But there's always going to be critics. But still, if we keep that in mind, we can't lose.
Wow. No, I think those were all very rich answers. And I really appreciated and resonated with, or by hearing some of the experiences as each of you, I think, described in different details of how you kind of have developed as a profession, as a professional here in architecture, and what that experience is like. Gianna, I have to say it was really profound hearing you speak about your experiences and how, because you haven't been afforded certain, privileges as you've made your way into becoming a licensed architect, that you're wanting to pave that way for others. That was very, I'm kind of lost for words for hearing that, and hearing a little bit from Siboney as well about her intentions of being involved with mentorship programs. I think hearing about that, not only thinking about the community that we serve, as an architect in the profession, but also the community of architects within the profession. So great experiences. I really appreciated hearing from all of you.
Awesome.
All right, on to our next question. So what role do designers have when it comes to issues of equity, in your opinion?
I actually wrote this down, so I will read what I wrote. Well, one of the things I stated was, as design professionals, we have a significant impact on supporting equity issues because through our education and training, we carry the responsibility to consider the impact of our design decisions on the community. Those design decisions are informed through active listening and really understanding the future use of those intentional spaces. And here's a quote that I definitely wanted to state tonight. But former AIA President William Bates said, ultimately, we are more than designers and builders. We are facilitators. We are at our most effective when we remember that everyone deserves to be heard. So to me, that's our role. And with that, I will pass it along.
I think, from the earlier questions that were asked and responded to, I think it's pretty clear that we believe that it's our role as designers to really be in this fight together, regardless of what role you play, if you're student, professional, allied professional, or just a community member. Society is composed of all of us, community is composed of all of us, and our voices have to be heard. We have to, as designers, play an important role in making sure that we hear those voices and respond to it with a built environment that really addresses the concerns of all people. It's very difficult to do that, of course, but there are some concrete things I think as designers we have to do. And I would say as young designers, you have to realize your power and the part that you play in communicating this. I think a lot of times as young designers, especially when you're in an economy like what we're in a financial situation that the country is in at this point, you feel as though you're powerless, like you're at the mercy of a system that you haven't even had a chance to interject your voice yet, but you have a really big voice right now. And I think whatever happens with this election, whatever happens with COVID-19, our profession will be greatly changed, and it's going to be upon the younger folks who will actually boost us up to the next level that we need to get to. I think there are a lot of firm leaders right now struggling to address EDI as well as trying to keep their doors open. and there's a lot of opportunity on that we're a lot of large scale societal issues that we are facing right now, and we have to figure out how to address them. I mean, I think there are some educational issues with how we're educating our students and getting them prepared. They may not always be prepared for situations like this. There are issues I see with our ARE and registration process to become licensed architects. And I think you can challenge and push that needle forward if you understand how powerful your voice is, and use the large body of your fellow students and young designers to help move and vocalize the charge. There are a number of things I can see on the forefront, and I'm just now beginning my role with the AIA Strategic Council, but I'm looking forward to what I can do there. And I would say to you to also get involved in organizations that you feel passionate about and causes that you feel passionate about. There are a number that we've mentioned, and the ones that Siboney put in chat, I think were excellent. I peeked at a couple of those. I'd heard a little bit about Dark Matter University, but I didn't really know the cause, and I read through some of the actionable items. And I would say, like, as what Siboney said at the very beginning of this call, is we need to look for the actionable items that really will make a difference, instead of just being upset. You really used your voice and your as a power to move yourself forward in this industry. I don't know what is out there on the job front for you guys, but I know it's not looking very great. And I would encourage you to be creative, be fearless, and really champion whatever you want to do, whatever you see this industry lacking that you can fill a void in. Really pursue that, because on the other side of this, I think a lot of firm leaders are going to be looking for those folks who are entrepreneurs that are really able to help them solve some problems and get some new opportunities for them. So really use your mind and think differently.
Yes, all that. I think recognize your power is something I wish that I had heard much earlier in life. I think it would have made a lot of situations easier or less painful. So I want to just really repeat that, because it is about showing up and listening, but then understanding that your voice is important. And I think the showing up is key, right? So getting involved and kind of using your time and your space to collaborate and connect with each other, to try to figure out and kind of redefine what this profession is going to look like coming out, after all of this. Back to what Gianna said, I think too, as someone who moved here to work on community development, to work with community in community, and then the pandemic hit, I've had to redefine what community engagement looks like. And I think that it's our responsibility to rethink those systems, right? A designer, I thought of it as a design problem. Community meetings were not ideal to begin with. And we need to understand that just because some things have been the way that they have been forever doesn't mean that they need to be. And so I think that going back to the accessibility, the role of designers is thinking through past systems, challenging them, and then being creative about what we're going to do next. And a couple just examples in community engagement, we would have had meetings. Can't have meetings, so we've had virtual meetings. And then I created a website, and then we started texting, texting service with updates. And now we have sidewalk stickers, and now we have a movable, portable like billboard for people that don't have a phone, and we have information in multiple languages. And so it's like all of these things all at once, knowing that I might only get, sorry, there's sound in the background, knowing that you might only get like 20 tech subscribers, but those are 20 people that you wouldn't have had outreach to before, right? And so understanding that there are multiple ways to approach community engagement versus like the 2 community meetings where you had 50 people at each one, right? Like, okay, was there childcare? Was there food? How many, you know, was it recorded? Was it accessible? How, like, all of these other pieces, I think going back to the accessibility, it's our responsibility to be creative in that outreach and in that effort. Yeah, and I think just continuing to challenge, and by challenge I mean question, systems that don't sit right with you. There is a feeling when you understand something is inequitable and unjust, and you need to speak up because there is power in your voice. And so doing that, and then creating space for healing. I think that, right, we're all in some sort of pain right now, different degrees of pain for various reasons. And so I think it's also our role to create spaces for healing and spaces for joy with each other.
Wow, thanks again. I like how there's the perspectives here. They kind of spoke to kind of, I guess, 2 ends of the spectrum. One was how, as designers, it's part of our role is to be this facilitator. I think, Maurice, you were the one who were describing that not only are we designing things, but we're hearing from all of the people who have a seat at the table, everyone who's wants to be heard. And part of our role is to be that ear and the voice for those who want to be heard. But so that was one thing that I heard there, but also, you know, to be independent and take power in what we could do. That's also equally as important. And I'm glad to hear that we got to see both perspectives there. Before we go on to our final question, we're already to the last question. See, I'm glad we had enough time to go through all these. But before I get to that, I wanted to remind everyone, faculty, we have some faculty here as well as students. If you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat. The Q&A will come right after this. But with that, I'll move on to our final question of the evening. And this relates specifically to our students. What can we do as students, either as advocates for all of these issues that we've been describing here tonight, or as individuals who may be personally dealing with issues of injustice in their own personal lives?
I would
go ahead, Gianna.
I would regurgitate what I just said, and, you know, use your voice, get involved, and know that you are your own advocate in a lot of situations. That's unfortunate, but if you don't find a space that you can advocate for yourself, find someone or identify someone that can advocate on your behalf, and reach out. Don't be afraid. It may or may not work out, but always keep searching for that person that can advocate on your behalf and move the needle forward for you. If you're in a situation where you are unfortunately facing some type of discrimination, definitely say something. Don't go silent. Don't assume that someone understands. Don't assume that someone sees that it's happening. Do speak up and say something. I wish I had earlier in my career had voiced my concerns about my firm leadership and lack of opportunities for me to move forward in my career. I probably would be a lot better off. But I think it had to have happened the way it happened for me to be in the position I am in right now, where I am an advocate for the profession. So that would be what I would say as a student, as wherever you sit right now in your academia, if you're just beginning your education or are nearing the end and looking towards professional career, really evaluate what you're looking forward to getting out of your education or profession, and create that path for yourself, or identify people who can help you get there.
I mean, even just to piggyback on what Gianna, that was kind of how I was going to start the question, was just do what Gianna said earlier with the last question, because she answered it perfectly. But my charge would be just be bold, lead, and be authentic. this profession, we need you. There's injustice. There's there are differing opinions out there. They're going to be there, but don't let that stop you. Continue to move forward. Continue to just strive to do your best, be your best, and give your best. Um, you know, the solutions that are ahead of us, they're going to come from you. And, we need, being bold, being authentic, it will lead to just a better, brighter future for all of us. I thought about some of the injustices that I've come across, even just in college and coming up through the profession, and they were there. Uh, I had one principal of a firm that I worked for when I was doing my internship, and I'll say it, um, he had told me that, Maurice, I don't know if this town is ready for a Black architect. And that was very uh, eye-opening for me. I had, my mom, God bless. I mean, she's still here, but my mom, she's just taught me to just go for it. I mean, we're spiritual people, and our faith is strong, and it's helped guide me to overcome quite a few uh, hurdles in life. But when that hurdle hit me, it was a hurdle, and it made me question if I wanted to continue in this profession. But then when you look at the numbers of the numbers, when you look at the number of Black professionals, architects that are in this profession, I mean, where we're looking at 116,000, and 2% of that number are African American. Um, that is startling, and we are in a profession that is 100, 200 years old. Granted, we are only 150 years past emancipation, but still, it was just eye-opening for me. But at the same time, you lead and you be authentic. I'm myself everywhere I go. I make no excuses for who I am, my thoughts, my truth. And as young people, as you come into this profession, lead and be yourself and bring it, man. Just bring it. I love to be around great designers, and just the ideas could just be flowing. And I mean, we're creators, man. Let's do this thing. So um yeah. And if you are experiencing anything, I mean, as Gianna mentioned earlier, there are various organizations for you to reach out to get assistance with dealing with those injustices. So
I actually wrote down this response, Maurice. But before I read what I wrote, I just a quick note on my own experience. There was, I have had an experience with an incident, and I cannot emphasize enough the importance of documentation of that. And I know it's painful and it seems transactional, but you're working in a system that relies on the documentation of such issues. And know that there are you're not alone. Unfortunately, you're not alone in whatever situation you're going through. And that can also be, it's sad, but it's powerful too, because there are resources out there. So you need to find them, and I'm sorry that's a reality that needs to change. So my notes are they're really quick. I wrote breathe, hydrate, rest, know you're not alone, create and hold safe space, be prepared to be doubted often, and be ready to never know whether prejudice is rooted in your age, gender, sexual orientation, or ethnicity. Sometimes it's a fun cocktail of who knows what. If you are BIPOC, and I'll kind of evoke people of color is what Brian C. Lee says. Know that your margin for error is often smaller in some situations, unfortunately. And so just remember that. Remember to take credit for your successes. I know I said earlier that it needs to be more of a collective, but be sure to honor your contributions to a collective as well. No, you do not need to attend every argument that you're invited to. Practice self-preservation in moments when you need to. Ask difficult questions and publicly acknowledge the successes of other women and BIPOC peoples in your field. Verbally acknowledge those in meetings. Say people's names in meetings. Thank people. That's huge. Be a mentor. You need it when you can. And I said, make art for yourself and find joy.
And if I could piggyback on what Siboney just said, which was great, mentorship is so important. Find a mentor. The mentors I've had have helped me tremendously in my career. But the mentorship is critical.
Well, thank you all again. Again, awesome answers to that final question. And just a final reminder, Q&A questions, please include them in the chat, or here in a moment, feel free to also speak out as well. I think going back to like the origins of our team planning this event, one of the like fundamental things that we wanted to be able to provide is kind of an outlet for conversations like these to take place, because for several students, maybe whether or not they're here for the first time in college in architecture school, or they've been here a while, they may not always be afforded the chance to hear from perspectives like these. And I think, well, I certainly think that we've been very fortunate to hear from, these diverse experiences, and also to see how each of you have had different obstacles that you've had to overcome, but you have overcome them. And all of you have made great contributions to the profession and the communities that you're working in. And I just wanted to say thank you for being a part of this conversation. We're hoping that this isn't the only one. We want these to be continuing conversations that we could have by inviting people in and to give insight to our students. So from AIAS, I just wanted to say thank you for being a part of our conversation today. It's been very eye-opening and much appreciated. Thank you. Unless there's anything else. What's that?
Sorry, no, I was wanting to respond to that question.
Sure. Yeah, so Brad, do you mind going ahead and asking your question, and feel free to introduce yourself as well.
Well, first, let me just say thank you. I really appreciate the conversation. And my name is Brad Bell, I'm the director for the School of Architecture. And I think when this first came up as an opportunity, and Josh Nason and said that the students were interested in putting this together, I thought this was absolutely amazing, that this would be something that was led by the students and really engaged outside community and brought the conversation that was, I think, critical for us as a community within the school and the college. And so let me just reiterate that deeply appreciative of our guests tonight, and thought that the conversation's been absolutely really inspiring. So first, let me just say thank you. And I want to kind of build off of the fact that because we're in the academic context, I'm interested in gleaning your knowledge on what you would be like as an educator, knowing that you are educators in your own right. But if you were to get up and teach a class, we've been talking a lot about listening and action. And so what would, as my question says, what would a class on listening to community as a service look like for you? Or if you were to teach a class on action for the community as service, what would that look like? really ultimately it's about breaking down academic paradigms, because I think if anything, we have our own ways of working that have these, I think, walls that we've built up for, if not decades, maybe even centuries. And so I think we could work very hard to break those down as well.
Thank you, Brad. I'm going to take that question first, only because after this, I need to finish preparing for a class I am teaching at the Boston Architectural College called Community Practice. So I wouldn't say it's perfect. I think the key part, and I think that the important part to remember, and what I remind my students often, is that community organizing is messy, and it cannot be this this piece that is prescribed for every project. And I think actually that's the challenge as to why it hasn't been incorporated more easily in various processes as part of conceptual design or schematic or throughout, because it's a variable that often changes, and you can't define it before you engage, and you need to keep redefining it. You need to come back, and that makes it hard to track financially. It makes it hard to track on a timeline, but it can be done. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it's harder to teach, because in any meeting things will shift. And so when I tell my students that, right, I expect for these pieces, these realities, to often be moments of conflict, because when you're doing community engagement, you are dealing with past generational traumas as part of the process. And so you need to be open and sympathetic and empathetic in those moments. And so there's just a humanity component that needs to be a part of that process. Wanted to say something else. Oh, another piece that we talk about is folding in art. Who are we collaborating with? And who are we prioritizing as part of narratives in community design and community activism? And I think a part of that is community organizers and justice nonprofits. Justin-based nonprofits, they've been doing this for years and years and years. And in many ways, I kind of come forward with as much humility as possible when asking for their time, because we have a lot to learn from other disciplines in community-based processes. I'll leave it there.
And just to piggyback on what Siboney said, it is, it is coming into that community, being empathetic, but also knowing the history. You have to do your research. You have to have a good understanding of how that community, became formed and shaped to what it is. And as you dive into those conversations, as Siboney mentioned, they will be passionate, and it will be advantageous to have someone, if you're not the one that can be empathetic, or if you get a little riled up with certain things, then at least have someone there with you that can help diffuse, or help to not even necessarily diffuse, but even just to help navigate through the conversation. But yeah, I think it's just being empathetic, knowing the history, documenting, making sure that the conversation is documented, that voices are heard, and then also bringing, even before you lay a line on a piece of paper, or put out the first whopping 3-dimensional whatever, really, regurgitate, give it back to the community. Okay, so when we met at that such and such a date, these are the things that we thought we heard. Are we accurate with this? Get confirmation on what you're hearing. So empathy, and just confirmation.
So it's been a while since I've been part of academia. So I'm not sure how I would teach a class especially within the confines of what a classroom that I remember looked like. I don't know how you can do a community-based project in a classroom based on my recollection. Just because I just based, just what Maurice and Siboney said, there's a lot of time that's involved in getting a community to even trust you. There's a lot of broken promises that have happened to people of color, and to get them to even believe you are who you say you are and can deliver anything that would be meaningful, that will transform their lives, when they have never seen it happen before. That takes a long long time to get through that process. So I don't know how you build that into a typical class project. I don't know how you do that. So I really can't answer the question.
I think that's a fair point. And when it comes to engaging with communities, as we've kind of discussed already, trust is very important. But I think, if anything, that would just allude to the importance of, not only if you are doing a course, say on community engagement, to not let it be a one semester thing or a 1 year thing, that if that is to be successful, there needs to be a certain level of commitment to that community. That way that trust could be built. And I think I liked your response, Maurice, about, documenting and giving back to the community, and just to be sure that everybody's on the same page, that we heard you correctly, because I think that's also important, to not only listen to communities, but to also be sure that that you understand what they're asking for, what they're wanting.
Which is what you would do with other clients.
Right.
That's what you would do with it. You wouldn't just get the one meeting, do a sketch and build something, right?
Correct. Absolutely.
Let me go ahead and in the interest of time, I'll go ahead and read these next questions so we could try to get to everybody. But the next one was, if you could pick any single entity, whether that's a good resource, architect, author, etc., who or what would you recommend looking into which highlights these issues? And do you mind providing some of those resources so we could understand them? I know we had a couple already shared in the chat throughout the conversation so far.
There have been so many recently, and honestly, I know for a lot of people in NOMA, they have just been bombarded to add their voices to the conversation. And so I don't think you can not turn on your computer and look up equity and not find someone who's just speaking a profound word about the subject matter. And so there are a lot of voices that are being tapped into. And I actually encourage you guys, write a blog. There are a lot of opportunities for you to add your voice to publications. They're always seeking perspectives. So maybe I should list a couple of those publications that you could add your voice to. You could be that one single entity. But I think it's a collective. I don't know if there's one that I would suggest. There's this collective of folks who are moving us forward with this conversation. And let me see if I can just add a couple to chat.
Yeah, I want to be clear that the last reference I put in there was not the response to that question. That's just a really basic one. I think, Gianna's right. There are many people who are doing work. I would highlight Pascal Sablan, who's out of New York, who runs this really beautiful initiative called Beyond the Built Environment, and has done a tremendous, if you don't follow them I'll put it in the chat after. She has created a space she Googled architects, like great architects, and it was all white dudes. And so she was like, I'm going to create my own library. And it's called the Great Designers Library, where she has created a reference of various BIPOC designers and architects as a way to just document that. And she highlights a new person every week on Instagram. So for the whole week, they get control over the account. And so you get to see their stories. And I think storytelling is a part of the mentorship that maybe we're not getting in COVID times. And so I think, if you're on social media, it is like, I think of Beyond the Built Environment as like a therapy.
Yeah, and
That's just one though. There are a lot.
Pascal is she will be she will be the next NOMA president. Not in 2020,
2023.
2023.
After, after Jason.
After Jason Pugh is he'll be the upcoming NOMA president next year, and then after him it will be Pascal as well. But yeah, I mean, as far as resource author, there are so many. You know, Jack Travis, architect out of New York, he has a book on African American architects. I think he was one of the first that put a book out on African American architects. I got a chance to meet him in DC at my first NOMA conference that I attended years ago. But some other books that I'm kind of currently reading, I mean, I can share it with you. One is called Black Built. Forgive me, I was kind of looking, my library's behind me. I was kind of looking back trying to see, but it was a little bit out of my reach. But that's one that I'm reading right now. And another one is The Crisis of the African American Architect by Melvin Mitchell. Those are just two resources that I'm currently reading, just to help with building awareness and context, and help me understand just, you know, our history, and how we, you know, where we've come from and where we're going, just as Black professionals.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And I see more are dropping in. And so thanks for those. I don't want to run too long, so I'll try to find, I want to be sure that we get to all the critical questions here. One that I see here, I'd like to invite Professor Dennis Chiesa. I know these issues are right up his alley, and he's very invested in these. So if you don't mind introducing yourself and asking your question.
Sure. Hi, Sam. Hey, great panel. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you all for being here. Let me see, I typed that up earlier. So often the profession looks to education and academia to fix longstanding problems. And this is common, I think, across all professions. It was brought up in a book by Michael Sandel on the tyranny of merit. And so this happens across the board, and then they're usually expecting academia and to try to solve these issues. Many times this means, you know, sort of kicking the can down the road and saying the next generation will fix it because we'll be more diverse, we'll be more all of these things. And that in essence means that we're not holding ourselves accountable. And so how do we begin to do that?
Well, I think as people of color or culture or whatever you want to call us, we definitely have to hold the profession, and that's academia, the professional environment, and the community at large accountable. I know that when I start seeing all the diversity and inclusion, racial justice marketing statements pop up across social media, it was very disturbing to me, because I had been here fighting for this stuff for a long time, and large corporations were solving it in 5 seconds. And I think, like I said, you use your voice and you push back on that, and no matter who you are, where you sit at the table, no, I don't expect the younger generation to solve this. I expect me in my position where I am to do the most, because I want that younger generation to have a far easier time at this than I did. I don't want you to struggle. I don't want you to have to fight as hard as I fought. I want my having been here to have made some type of difference. And I want to have used my time here to the best benefit I can to our culture and our community at large. And so the how, I think you have to say, when you see injustice, when you see something that's not going the way it should be, or is an issue for you, you identify that, and you, if it's an organization that you're a part of, you challenge it to that organization, and you ask for a response, you follow up. And as Siboney said, you document if it's happening to you personally.
Yes.
Get a witness. And if you need to find a tribe to help you work towards a solution, even, you know, try to help promote a solution and offer that to organizational leaders. I think we have to hold this profession accountable, and we have to voice where injustice is happening, and voice and identify where that's happening. But I don't know about kicking a can down the road. You may want to add that to your list, Siboney, by the way, kicking a can down the road.
So many.
I don't know how we get away from doing it, but I think we have to, and Dennis, you know, we've been on conversations about this. We just have to keep trying, but I don't know at what point I stop kicking the can, because I've been kicking this can for a long time. I would like to stop, but I don't see a foreseeable future for it.
Go ahead, Siboney.
I agree. I want to acknowledge the fact that when all those statements came out, it was really problematic for me too. Trying to advocate for things, and kind of the sudden urgency was actually quite insulting. To see what it took to get to a point where there was consideration. It was the urgency. Okay, now we got to do this. I think, so I'm a part of a group, a Cornell alumni group, where we did a lot of follow-ups, exactly what Gianna said. We met with the dean, we met with the chair. We said, okay, well, how much money is being allocated, right? What is a tenured position that can support BIPOC students, incoming students? Like, what is the actual infrastructure that can exist at a departmental level to support the statement that you just made? What is that financial endowed situation? And so challenging also the funds, I think, is also a key piece. The fix the things, I think, you see it all the time, where if you don't want to pay now, you'll pay later. And so just personally within a community engaged process, I'm seeing that we're paying more legal fees to fix a situation when we could have reached out to community before, because now we're reaching out to attorney. We're paying legal fees rather than, say, supplying meals to community members or paying for a different internet or texting service, right? So what are those compromises? And when you do push things back or kicking whatever down wherever, you can't keep doing that, because you're going to spend more money and more energy later. And so I think we can't keep relying on that. The urgency is now. And I think using our energy to support each other and having conversations like this helps support that. So this conversation, however exhausting it is to speak publicly, gives me power and energy to go into my community practice prep for tomorrow. So know that.
I can't come behind that. Siboney, she knocked it out. Her and Gianna knocked it out the park. I mean, you know, the can has been kicked down the road long enough. And now I think the can is standing upright. You know, and we got to take advantage of the opportunity while we have it. You know, when I saw all the statements come out, you know, after George Floyd's tragic murder, or tragic murder, you know, the first thing I did, you know, I had emailed my university and I said, hey, what are we doing about this? And they were already ahead of it, and had statements. And you know, now my alma mater has recently formed a NOMAS chapter as well. So as unfortunate the events over the past few months have been, I hope that the awareness and the action behind the awareness sticks. I think that when when COVID hit, and it affected the country in more ways than just our health. Um, it really caused the country to take a deeper look at the many injustices that um, you know have continued for decades. But I hope that my hope is that now, as we move forward, we will continue to have conversations like we're having. We'll continue to raise the red flag when we see things that are not right, and we say something. And not only saying something, but really putting that action behind changing it. The momentum is there, and we just have to. Uh, we just got to take advantage of it. We got to change. We got to change it. I'm hoping that in another 10, 15, 20 years from now, hopefully not that long, this conversation will almost be like, why were we even talking about this back then? You know, and I really mean that more in a good way, that, we've had so much change that, man, well, why were we even talking about it back then? I think about the questions I had as a college student. I remember approaching a professor of mine one time, coming out of of a architectural history class, and we went over everything, but we did not cover what I felt was more important, which was more, African architecture. We didn't talk about anything within the continent of Africa, and how just from slavery through Reconstruction through the 20s. I mean, we as a people, we contributed to those structures at that time, and there was no documented history. It wasn't even talked about. Whereas now, 2020 going into 2021, I've got resources around me that I can grab with that I did not have 20 years ago. So we're making some progress, but there's a lot more. Uh, uh, we got to go a lot further.
Unless there was a final thought there, Siboney, were you going to say something? Okay, good.
No, I really was unmuting to thank you all. Not just Isaiah and Patricia and the whole department, but also I know Marcos is doing tech stuff. So I want to thank you all for creating this space. And
Yes.
a couple of my recommendations are reflected in the fact that this is happening.
Oh, well, we just wanted to be sure that we could provide opportunities like this to our students as leaders here in our school. So I think all of us, we feel like this was just something that we needed to have done, and we're glad to invite guests like you all to be here tonight. We're about a half hour past 7. I think we should probably cut it there. I apologize, we didn't get to all of the questions. But as some of our guests have mentioned in the chat, if you want to follow up with them afterward, please feel free to do so. Once again, I just wanted to say thank you, Siboney, Gianna, and Maurice for joining us. I've really appreciated hearing from you all, and I look forward to connecting with you after. But thank you. And Patricia, did you have anything you wanted to say before we log off?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank all of our panelists for sharing all of their experiences with us, and Maurice and Gianna. I mean, you guys were super helpful this past summer with, bringing the NOMAS chapter to the UTA. So I want to give you guys a huge shout out for that. And I really appreciate all of you guys just being here today. So thank you so much.
And if I may, a couple more thanks I need to make. One, especially to Josh Nason. He was the one who kind of, or he has been one of our biggest advocates, especially here for this conversation that we're having here today. And I appreciate all the work that he's done, just whether it's been giving feedback or being an advocate with us amongst our college. It can't go understated how much we appreciate you, Josh, as well as Brad Bell. Thank you for your collaboration as well. Very much appreciated. But if no one else has anything else to say, I think that's a great place to end it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us there in the audience. I appreciate you attending. And everybody have a good evening and stay safe.
Bye.